Hello and welcome to GameSack. Let's check out some games and their follow-ups. Unofficial follow-ups, mind you. These games often had some of the same staff who worked on the original game or series, or sometimes the company just does it themselves, or sometimes there's not even anyone in common involved. The rules are very, very loose here. And this episode is a spiritual follow-up to the spiritual sequels episode of 2016, and I guess the Copycat Games episode also from 2016. Anyway, let's get to our first example. Strider from Capcom made its way into the arcades in early 1989. It was based on the manga called Strider Hiryu, introduced a year earlier. I really should learn how to read. In this game, designed by Koichi Yotsui, you play as a ninja. At least I think he's supposed to be a ninja anyway. He moves like one, but his face is on full display. Anyway, he slashes with his sword and jumps around like a mofo. That's right, I'm directly comparing his jumping ability to that of mofos. Strider can get various power-ups like a temporary longer sword attack. He can also get little robo-pals that follow him around and destroy enemies that they touch. He can get a robo-eagle friend which flies around and destroys enemies that it touches, and even a robo-panther friend which roams around and destroys enemies that it, well, you get the idea. Strider was an agile character for a 1988 game. He could climb up walls, hang from ceilings, and sometimes gravity even switched and he finds himself moving and jumping upside down. The way everything changed so much, even in a single stage, was brilliant and fresh. There are only 5 stages, but they are each quite large, especially for the era. The graphics are a treat, with lots of well-defined enemies that have cool or even weird designs. The music changed several times per stage with lots of different musical tracks, at least in the later revision of the arcade game, and of course the subsequent home versions. While the music goes perfectly with the action, it doesn't really lend itself to being enjoyed while not playing the game, and that's perfectly fine. Of course, this was ported to many different platforms back in the day, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Strider's first spiritual follow-up is Osman by Mitchell, released in the arcades in 1996. Or is it OS Man? I mean, look at it, the OS is bigger than the man in the title. It's OS Man. Maybe he's on a quest for the perfect 90s OS, and the instruction set bros are trying to stop him. This one features many of the staff from the original Strider arcade game, including Koichi Yotsui. I talked about this one way back in 2012 and left in the arcade too, as it never received a home port. It was also briefly mentioned in the Copycat Games episode in 2016. Right off the bat, you're reminded of Strider just based on how everything looks. True, there's no sword here, and all you really do is kick. But the way OS Man jumps around, slides, and the way the enemies die, a lot of things here really make it feel like it's similar to the Strider II Yotsui might have imagined had he stayed at Capcom. There's even a room where fluctuating gravity tosses them around in a circle, just like in Strider. You can get power-ups that make your kick a bit stronger and also life refills. You also have a bomb button where you'll bounce around the screen doing a crazy attack, of which you only have 3 of these per life. These can take bosses down pretty quickly if you use it at the right time. The game is incredibly easy thanks to being able to continue right where you die. That is until the last stage where it sets you back even when you die and just throws everything at you to make sure that you do die. I wish they could have been consistent with this. The graphics are nice and feature some great animation in a few spots. The stages here share the same love of diagonal surfaces that Strider did. Overall, it just can't match how nice Strider looks though. The game looks less smooth with lots of flashing things, and it just kind of looks like a mess in spots. The audio is definitely its own thing and it has some good stuff going on, but the quality is extremely thin sounding. Well, that's what you get when you work on lesser arcade hardware than what Capcom has. It's a good game, but it can't really live up to its inspiration. Moondiver is the third spiritual follow-up to Strider. This came out for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 digitally only in 2001 from Feel Plus and Square Enix. This one was also headed by Yotsui, and honestly, I've got to say that this one is not very good. However, the gameplay is still reminiscent of Strider. You have a sword-slashing dude who can cling to any surface, and he moves briskly. The stage design also features lots and lots of diagonal surfaces. This one seems to prefer that you play in multiplayer as it supports up to 4 players. After each stage, you can increase your stats a bit depending on how well you did. You also level up during gameplay as you collect experience. The control in this one really takes a dive. You can only move your dude with the analog stick, and honestly, that's not the best way to play a 2D game. This makes it feel a little loose and slow to respond. The D-pad is only used for selecting your magic. You can crouch and slide, but it's not as simple or as natural as it was in Strider and Osman. You can only crouch by pressing the left trigger, and you can only slide by pressing the right trigger. What the hell? The stages are extremely long, and the variety of enemies is extremely low. Quite often in any given stage, you'll be trapped on a single screen where you need to defeat a ton of the same enemies that you've already been fighting before you're allowed to move on. I guess they wanted to make sure that you got bored. Once in a blue moon, you'll fight a boss. I like that this one has a life bar, but not all bosses do, like this one. Oh yeah, you only have 1 life, and if you die, you need to replay the entire stage, and the stages are, like I mentioned, extremely long, and also, like I mentioned, kinda boring. I plotted my way through stage 3 different times trying to beat this guy, and my life ended really fast each time. That's where I decided that I'm never playing this again, because honestly, it's just not worth it at all. It's never fun. You still get to increase your skill a small amount when you restart, but the amount of grinding required is just insane. And this is coming from an idiot who generally loves grinding, it's just they didn't pull it off well here. This is so bad that it almost makes it feel like one of those free-to-play games. The graphics are okay, but the stages all look extremely similar. Strider had so much variety in a single stage. What happened here? There's also a very thick and dark vignette placed on screen the entire time you play. I don't know why they felt the corners of the screen needed to be so dark. The music sounds good at first, but quickly becomes repetitive, and it all starts to sound the same from stage to stage. Weirdly, if you have your console hooked up in surround, the sound effects come from the front speakers and the music only comes from the surround speakers, at least on the 360 version here. It's very odd and not a good sound design. Ultimately, I'm disappointed in this one. It's never been released physically, and that's fine. You might want to keep your $15. I like it when a company does an unabashed spiritual follow-up to one of their own games like this next one. I also like using that word, unabashed. Is that a $1 word, a $2 word? Probably not a $2 word. How does one assign monetary value to words anyway? And what's the exchange rate? Comment below. Virtua Cop from Sega first appeared in the arcades in 1994. I'm playing the Saturn version here because, well, why not? You play as a cop who wants to shoot everything in sight. And this game lets you do exactly that. 2 players, each with their own light gun, can play at once, or you both can use controllers, or one of you can use a light gun and the other a controller. It's really up to you guys. Anyway, there are some shenanigans going on down at the docks, and you are the only cop sent. Or, you know, the only 2 cops sent if you're playing 2-player. You're not sure exactly what's going on, but it's just best to shoot everyone that you see. Well, not everyone. You get penalized if you shoot innocent people. The screen zooms in, and a target icon appears around a subject as they're getting ready to fire on you. This means they're a threat. This zooming really gives Virtua Cop its unique feel, as other Sega light gun games like House of the Dead don't do this. Oh, check it out. Looks like there's some construction going on. Yeah, well, I'm not too keen on that. I'm just gonna shoot you. All of you. Ain't gonna gentrify my neighborhood. Then there's the terrorist headquarters building with lots of people to shoot. Well, again, you don't want to shoot the innocents. Wait, what are innocent people doing wandering around the terrorist headquarters anyway? I think I should probably shoot them just to be sure. It doesn't matter, this game is just so fun. Unfortunately, there are only 3 levels, and thus the game is over rather quickly. It's very faithful to the arcade, though I do wish they would have added a level or 2 for the Saturn port. I've always enjoyed the simple yet good visuals, and the music is classic. Of course, this game had its own direct sequels with Virtua Cop 2 and 3. I don't think I've ever had a chance to play Part 3, but in Virtua Cop 2, you can choose your route midway through the stage. That of course gives this one a little bit more longevity. You really can't go wrong with Virtua Cop unless you're looking for something that's longer than half an hour or so. The spiritual follow-up is called
Confidential Mission.
also from Sega. It showed up in the arcades in 2000 and it was ported here to the Dreamcast, which is how I'm playing it in 2001. Well, I'm playing it in 2023, but it came to the Dreamcast in 2001. It's not Virtua Cop, but one look at this game running and you couldn't be blamed for thinking that it is. It's basically a secret agent take on Virtua Cop, if you will. Once again, up to 2 players can play at once with 2 guns, or 1 gun and 1 controller or 2 controllers. Anyway, it's much more fun using the gun. As you can see, it looks very similar to Virtua Cop in the way that the enemies are marked. As always, there's also tons of innocent people to shoot, and it can be pretty easy to accidentally shoot them sometimes. You can collect the occasional special weapon, of course, as well as restore some life. There's other icons that you can shoot for extra points as well. Sometimes you'll engage in a special operation like plugging gas vents with adhesive bullets, decoupling a railroad car, and stuff like that. It's not necessary to succeed at these, but your route will change slightly depending on your success. The different routes make this one a bit more like Virtua Cop 2 than Part 1, but regardless of which way you go, you'll always end up in the same place. Unfortunately, this game is also pretty short, as again, it only has 3 rounds. If you're decent, you can easily beat it in half an hour. Still, it's a fun ROM, especially if you're using a light gun. I just hope you're not annoyed with the screen flashing. It doesn't really annoy you as you play, but as you watch it on a YouTube video, it's definitely more apparent. As with most Dreamcast light gun games in North America, you'll have to use a third-party gun as it's not compatible with Sega's official gun, which was never released over here anyway. The graphics are pretty good and a definite step up above the Saturn light gun games. You can even play it in full 480p like I am here, and the light gun still works. The music is certainly fine, though it's nothing tremendously memorable. I like this one, but I do think that the Virtua Cop games are a bit more memorable overall. Still, it's a really fun game that'll be over before you know it, but it is worth multiple playthroughs.
I'll give you a final blow!
Road Rash on the Genesis came out from Electronic Arts in 1991. I really wasn't expecting all that much from this one because the graphics looked rather basic in all the screenshots. But it didn't take more than 20 or 30 seconds of playing this one before I fell completely in love with it. Like most racing games, your goal is to rank high enough to advance. But this one also lets you attack the other racers. Normally when I play games like this, I just want to concentrate on the race and not on the battles, but EA actually made the fighting incredibly fun. I'd much rather battle in this racing game than in Mario Kart. But hey, that's just me, I guess. You can punch, kick, and even get a baton to knock your enemies out. Of course, they can do the same to you as well. I love how when you get knocked off your bike, you slide for a ways, likely getting all that road rash the game is named after. Ouch. You then have to get up and run all the way back to wherever the hell your bike went to continue the race. This is much more interesting than just resetting everything directly on the center of the track like so many other racing games do. As you play, you'll earn money to buy faster bikes, which of course helps you racing the longer tracks. You do this while avoiding other traffic and the police. The graphics are simple, but the sprites feature real software scaling done in real time. The game would probably run a little faster if they used animated sprites, but somehow that just doesn't seem as cool. The music in this one, well, let's just say it's divisive, but hey, I can dig it, even though it's very twangy. Of course, this one got a couple of cool sequels on the Genesis, but Road Rash on the 3DO here is where I feel that the series peaked. It came out in 1994. It's also on the Saturn, PlayStation, and PC. This is basically a remake of the first game, just gussied up with 32-bit accoutrements. This game also features scaling, and for its time the landscape was incredibly detailed. I love running over random people trying to cross the street. Yeah, that'll teach you. I love the silly sound effects. And this is one of the few games where I feel that the full motion video actually adds to the vibe of the gameplay in a positive way. The licensed soundtrack is great and it works extremely well. It doesn't get annoying since you don't hear it while you race. Some people want it to play while you race, but yeah, no, I just think it works better this way. This game really upped the humor level. There were a few other Road Rash games on other consoles, but they really weren't very noteworthy. People who grew up with Road Rash wanted more since EA wasn't doing anything with it, so we eventually got Road Redemption from Pixel Dash Studios and Fish Factory Games. This one is on the usual systems on the previous generation, and I'm playing it on the Switch here. The game was crowdfunded and specifically designed to be an evolution of Road Rash. As you play, you can't help but think of Road Rash right away. You're racing down a road and you have a variety of weapons that you can use to attack the other riders. Naturally, it's set in a post-apocalyptic future. You're not just racing now either. The campaign mode has actual missions that you need to do, like defeating a certain number of opponents. These can be tough because it feels like a lot of the other riders are way faster than you. The classic quick play mode does play a lot more like Road Rash though. Here, you just need to finish in the top 3 and not die, pretty much just like Road Rash. The controls aren't anywhere near as simple though, as now the game uses every button and it does suffer a bit for it. For example, in Road Rash, you only need one attack button. Here, you have one to attack left, another to attack right, and more buttons for kicking. Why is all this necessary? Bottom line, it absolutely isn't. Here, you can pick up icons to get more nitro, jet fuel of all things, weapons, and things like that. I really like some of the locales you race at, like on top of buildings jumping over the huge gaps using the previously mentioned jet fuel. This game can be crazy, and it does a decent job of keeping Road Rash's humor intact. Unfortunately, the game feels a bit cheap, and by that I mean low budget. I guess I could have just said low budget instead of cheap, right? But that's because it didn't raise a monumental amount of money during its crowdfunding, so I guess that's not surprising. The graphics are average, and I would have enjoyed it more if this game were in color. It's so gray and dull. It does have scaling though. It moves smoothly most of the time, but it does have some frame pauses and hiccups here and there. I'm not sure if this is limited to the Switch or if the other versions do that too. The sound is average, and the music fits well for the most part. I don't think that this one surpasses Road Rash by any means, but it's still worth checking out. Alright, now let's revisit one of the first games ever released for the Saturn and see what kind of stuff it inspired. Panzer Dragoon on the Saturn was an incredible launch game. I was immediately blown away by the intro, which is rare for me in any game. The setting, the music, it was all just incredible. But of course the gameplay is the most important piece, and it absolutely shines here as well. You play as a dude, riding on the back of a dragon trying to make your way to a tower to stop some evil. You aim your reticle and fire in that direction. If you hold the button down, you can lock on up to 8 targets as you glide your reticle over them. Release the button for a burst attack. You can look around in 4 directions by pressing the L and the R buttons on top of the Saturn controller. While the gameplay isn't complex or revolutionary by any means, it's absolutely fun. It's aided by some excellent graphics, which are even more impressive considering how early this game is for the console. Most early Saturn games struggled pretty hard, but not this one. It goes without saying that the creature and enemy designs are excellent as well. And naturally, the sound and music adds to the overall experience, and it really showed that Sega took this title seriously. Of course, this game had 2 sequels on the Saturn, both of which were great in their own way. It even showed up on the Game Gear in Japan. There's also the Xbox sequel, Panzer Dragoon Orta. I'm playing it here on the Xbox Series X, and wow, it looks fantastic here in 4K. Need I remind you that this game that you're looking at right here is over 20 years old? Unfortunately, this would be the last we'd see of the Panzer Dragoon universe, but at least it went out with a bang. This one is called Res, which was originally released by Sega. This is the Res Infinite version on the PlayStation VR, but all versions of this game play the same. This could be considered a spiritual follow-up to Panzer Dragoon as it has the same style of lock-on gameplay. This one was featured in the first spiritual follow-ups episode as it had its own unofficial sequel. One of the artists for this one also worked on Panzer Dragoon Saga. As good as this game is, and it is quite good, this is not the spiritual follow-up I want to focus on for this episode. That's right, here's Crimson Dragon for the Xbox One from Grounding and published by Microsoft in 2013. This one actually has several staff from the Panzer Dragoon games, including director Yukio Fudesugi. It initially started development as a Kinect-only Xbox 360 game, and that's when pretty much everyone on the internet lost interest in it. Can't blame them. But then it moved to the Xbox One and regular controls were added, but they're still an afterthought. You can play this one with the Xbox One Kinect, but I can't imagine how much of an awful experience that must be. Here, the right thumbstick controls the reticle and the left moves your dragon around. I often found myself concentrating on the reticle and forgetting to move my dragon since that happened effortlessly in the Panzer Dragoon games. I don't feel that this is a good change for the controls. It's like allocating the crouch and the slide to their very own buttons in that Moondiver game. There's no point in doing this when it already worked fine. You can now select between two weapons on the fly, one of them being your typical lock-on style attack. You, your weapons, and everything else powers up after each level you play. You can also have a wingman. Have him stay behind you to attack enemies, well, behind you, or bring him up front to increase your forward firepower. You can even combine an attack, but you have a limited number of these. You now have missions like a regular military-based game, and you'll play the same area again and again, but with different objectives. It makes the game feel stuffed with filler instead of actual substance. And it is. There's also constant radio buddies because the game knows you're an idiot who can't figure out anything on your own.
Your wingman will attack on their own. If they're in front, they'll attack forward.
Adding to the woes is that this is like one of those free-to-play games, only it's not free at all. I think the term is gacha. I hate that word, and I hate what it represents even more. That means you get rewards for even booting up the game, more on certain days, and you get more the more you play. It also means that there's a shop, which normally I would think is cool because you can buy new dragons. But if you want, you can buy gems with real money, so it's basically pay to win. And that also makes grinding in this game rather ridiculous. This really brings the game down, and honestly, since it has all this, I can't really classify it as a game. I just can't give it that kind of respect. I assume that maybe this was Microsoft's influence on the title? I honestly have no idea, but whoever's idea it was, I do wish that they had exited the video game industry before they came aboard this project. The graphics are pretty good, though all of the dragons look silly compared to the designs that we saw in the proper Panzer Dragoon games. Technically, the graphics aren't a big step above Panzer Dragoon Orta on the original Xbox, but some of the colors are cool. I do wish they would have designed the reticle with a border or a shadow because it can be easy to lose sight of it in the bright skies. The music was done by Panzer Dragoon Saga and Orta composer Sayori Kobayashi. She took a mostly different direction than the Panzer game, so they had Jeremy Guerin come in and arrange it with an orchestra. It's okay at best, but of course nothing can touch the original Panzer Dragoon's music. They should have gotten that composer. Actually, no, they shouldn't have, because this game is crap and it would have been a waste of their talent. Ultimately, this title doesn't live up, and I have a hard time recommending it, but without the gacha stuff, it could have been almost decent.
When the eels start to shimmer, that means they're about to attack. Pay close attention to avoid getting hit.
This is Devil's Crush on the mighty TurboGrafx-16 released in 1990. It was developed by Compile and Red and originally published by Naxat. It's video pinball, but it's damn good video pinball. This is basically a spiritual follow-up to Alien Crush. This was released earlier on the same system by the same people. While good, it's not as good. Anyway, your goal here in Devil's Crush is basically just to get a high of a score as you can and earn extra balls and, stuff like that. It's pinball. Sounds kind of mundane on the surface, but the spectacle is a large part of what makes any given pinball game special. And this one absolutely delivers in that area. Everything here is evil and occultish. If this game had existed in the early 80s, parents would have surely complained to the TV news people that this game was converting their kids to worshiping themselves some Satan. Fortunately, by the time this game came out, parents were no longer that stupid. Well, maybe they were, because they changed all of the pentagrams in the games to Stars of David. So, maybe some lucky Jewish kids got this game as a bar mitzvah present. I really like how this pinball game could not exist in the physical world, as things are moving around on the board. Also, you can go into bonus rounds which have their own unique screen, which is something else you can't do with real pinball. The physics feel decent enough in this one, and it's fun, even if you're not much of a pinball fan. I mean, I'm not really much of one. The graphics are excellent, and they do a great job of corrupting your children's souls. And I certainly can't not mention the music, which consists of an incredible metal tune. Only it sounds like the TurboGrafx-16, which means it sounds great! This is an absolute must-own for the console in my humble opinion. The Genesis got its own version of this game, which Tengen renamed Dragon's Fury when they brought it out in North America. They were just a publisher, they didn't make it. This is a straight-up remake of Devil's Crush for the console, but it was actually made by Technosoft, the wizards behind the Thunder Force games. It's pretty much the same game, but since it runs in a higher resolution, the playfield has been squished to the left so you can have a column of info on the right. Yay, I guess? The gameplay is basically identical, but the bonus rounds have a lot of flourish added to them, and some of them look absolutely incredible. The main board looks a little chunky compared to the original, but it's fine. The music is once again outstanding, but at the same time, it's certainly not Technosoft's best sound driver on the console. This brings us to our first Devil's Crush spiritual follow-up, Dragon's Revenge on the Genesis. This is Tengen's own sequel to Dragon's Fury. Neither Compile, Naxat, Red, nor Technosoft were involved in any way. So basically it's a spiritual sequel, but in the guise of a real sequel. You can immediately tell that the artists involved in both the visuals and the audio were not as talented as those who made the previous game on either the TurboGrafx-16 or the Genesis. I hate to be that harsh, but it's 100% true. The first thing you'll notice as you begin playing is how light and bouncy the ball feels. Seriously, it feels more like a ping pong ball instead of a solid heavy metal ball like it should. That said, the gameplay honestly isn't horrible. I like that the screen not only scrolls up and down, but sideways a bit as well. There's a lot of stuff on the board. It kind of keeps the occult vibe with a few demonic things wandering around, but this feels more like an adventure fantasy like Dungeons & Dragons compared to something that's outright evil. Well, actually, Dungeons & Dragons had the Satanic Panic in the early 80s, so hey, that counts for something. Unfortunately, I don't think this one will corrupt as many kids, and that's sad. The bonus rounds look fairly good. However, the music is awful and it uses the dreaded GEM sound driver. The song that plays isn't very long, so it loops often. Overall, it's not a bad pinball game, but man, it just can't live up to its fake pedigree. Of course, I should probably mention Naxat's own spiritual follow-up, Jackie Crush on the Super Famicom. I guess this one's based on the Japanese version of Satan, Jackie. This is another excellent video pinball game. That said, it's nowhere near as fun as Devil's Crush, but it does have some nice visuals and some excellent music. Unfortunately, this one was only ever released in Japan. That's just ridiculous, because if we could just put a few Stars of David in there, this would be perfect for a North American release. The most recent spiritual follow-up to Devil's Crush is Demon's Tilt.
Did you just say tits?
Tilt! This came out in 2019 for the Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox, and PC from Flarb LLC. I'm playing it on the Switch. This has a very similar layout with 3 vertical sections and a giant female face in the middle that changes. That's right, just like Devil's Crush. It has a lot of flair happening, for lack of better description, and it kind of reminds me of a bullet hell shooter, even though it's absolutely not. But that does bring me to my first criticism. There's so much going on that it can be easy to lose your ball visually. Next, everything is very small, and I feel that the screen could be zoomed in more. The developers might argue that the ball moves too fast to have it zoomed in more, and honestly I agree, but I think there are concessions that you need to make when it comes to video pinball. The physics here try to match real pinball, and it does so extremely well, but as a result the ball might move too fast for a video screen. There's a vertical mode that you can enable, and playing it this way certainly helps if you have a monitor that rotates, though I still feel everything is a bit too small. Seriously, everything being so small does make it harder to keep track of the ball. I would have liked to see some horizontal action as well, as everything seems concentrated in the center. I do like how there are things moving around on the board that could never happen in real pinball. The music sounds like an average Genesis game, and the melody is okay. It doesn't try to be like Devil's Crush, though I'm not sure that they build musicians like Toshiaki Sakota anymore. There's a lot of very loud sound effects, and after a bit they can start to feel rather annoying. There's no way to turn these sound effects down. Devil's Crush is a game that I just don't think can be properly followed up without the original members from Compile. There's a sequel to this one called Xenotilt, which basically looks to be more of the same. This next one is another example of a company doing a spiritual follow-up to one of their very own games. Check it out. Anytime now. Okay, come on! This is Guilty Gear X on the Sega Dreamcast from Arc System Works and Sammy. This one-on-one fighting game was only released in Japan on the console, but it was released worldwide on other platforms like the PlayStation 2 and the arcades. This is the second game in the Guilty Gear series, and I'm playing this one because, well, that's what I have access to. I could have loaded up the original, I guess, but You select from 14 different characters, each one with an exciting personality. You have punch and kick buttons if you want to attack that way, and also 2 slash buttons which use your edged weapon. One is a normal slash and the other is a hard slash. Playing this one using the regular Dreamcast controller is an absolute nightmare, and I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. But fortunately, you can use joysticks or a Total Control 3 adapter which lets you use a Saturn pad. The gameplay doesn't really break any new ground, and it's your typical one-on-one fighting game from the time. You have a tension gauge that fills up as your anxiety meds wear off during a fight. Once it's more than half full, you can do overdrive attacks, which cause more damage than your boring underdriven attacks. If it's completely full, you can even kill your adversary in one hit, even if they have a full life bar. You can also cancel your attacks and then put a different attack before it connects. The game is known for its visual flair, and boy does it ever deliver. The characters and backgrounds are all high-resolution 2D artwork. There are often 3D touches in the stage, like the clouds moving in the background of this one. The animation of the characters looks great, and almost like a real-life cartoon, which was cool at the time, and hell, it still looks great today. What's more is that this game is in full high resolution, including the characters. This was during a time when the Capcom fighting games on the same console still had ancient blocky characters, often on high-resolution backgrounds. It looks very out of place and honestly like a rush job. But Guilty Gear X here? Hell, it does it right. Imagine how big giant Capcom felt about being outclassed in the visuals department by a small developer. Actually, they probably didn't care because they make tons of money. Unfortunately, many of the characters share a stage in this one, so there's not a lot of variety. The music is another fantastic aspect of this one, often delivering excellent hard rock themes to fight to. The sound design is brought down by a single sound effect that happens all the time, and it's really grating on the ears. Yikes, who approved that? Anyway, this series would go on for like 21 games if you count the update versions and the spin-offs. BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, also from Arc System Works and published by Axis, is considered the spiritual follow-up to Guilty Gear. This one came to the arcades in 2008 and to the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2009. I'm playing on the PS3 here. It also came to the PSP and Windows the next year. Okay, first things first, BlazBlue? I think they probably mean BlazBlue, but if they wanted me to say BlazBlue, they should have spelled it BlazBlue. I've also heard that some people get super mad unless you pronounce it as BrayBlue. All I know is that this game could easily be in a Games with Dumb Names episode. Anyway, on to the actual game. This is the first one in the series. You can select from 12 different characters and you can unlock special versions of them by beating the game with each. The characters look very similar to the ones from Guilty Gear, but these peeps definitely aren't them. The control is somewhat similar to the Guilty Gear games, but instead of a hard slash, you now have a drive button. These are special attacks that differ for each character. You have a heat gauge, which is similar to the tension meter in Guilty Gear, over 50% full, and you can do a special distortion move. One thing that's neat is that as the combos get longer, they get weaker. That gives the recipient a chance to break free and perhaps even survive. I say this as someone who often gets his ass handed to him in fighting games. Yeah, I'm a man, I'll admit it. Overall, the gameplay feels snappy and responsive. I ended up not really worrying about using the special moves as often as I normally do, as the standard attacks did a fair job. The visuals are obviously similar to Guilty Gear, but advanced to the next level using the mind-blowing power that was available in the legendary year of 2008. The characters are higher resolution and the game runs in 720p. Remember when we thought 720p was HD? It's fine, don't get so upset. The animation is even better than Guilty Gear. However, when you jump, it's now just a digital puff effect instead of a hand-drawn animated puff cloud. The music is perfectly fine, but not as hard rockin' or as memorable as Guilty Gear. The characters talk way too much during a fight, but turning the voice volume down and changing them to Japanese helped them to be less annoying.
Here. Back off. Not quite.
This is a worthy spiritual follow-up that spawned like 18 games if you include the updated versions and the spin-offs. Give it a go. Who can forget Wipeout from Psygnosis, released on the PlayStation 1st in 1995? This was pretty special in its time. In fact, it's almost a spiritual follow-up of Nintendo's F-Zero that was on the Super Nintendo. Remember F-Zero? I sure do. Anyway, now you're racing weird European hover vehicles around cool-looking tracks in the future, which is, of course, dystopian. Why would it not be? You glide over sections on the roadway and they can give you temporary speed boosts, or even a weapon, just like Mario Kart. No, this game is not a spiritual follow-up to Mario Kart. Well, maybe it is. The controls in this first one are very floaty, leading to a suboptimal experience when playing the game these days. But back in 1995, we were just blown away by the premise and the presentation. The graphics are pretty smooth for 1995. They're also well rendered, with very little of the texture warping that the console likes to do if the camera gets too close to the texture. The game also features lots of licensed music, which makes racing fun and also tough for me to edit since YouTube's bots are lurking, waiting to pounce. Of course, we'd get sequels like Wipeout 3. These games only increase the amount of fun. We'd get true widescreen visuals, more tracks to race on, and more music. Of course, all your favorite racing teams would return. What's especially nice is that the controls improved in these games over time. In fact, it makes the earlier games a bit hard to go back to. This series would go on to see 12 releases if you count the collections and whatnot. It really made a name for itself, and for good reason.
confirmed.
That brings us to Redout from 34 Big Things and 505 Games for the Switch, PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Amazon Luna. Wait, what the hell is the Amazon Luna? Oh, cloud gaming. No thank you! Anyway, I'm playing the Xbox One version here because a new sealed copy of the Lightspeed Edition with tax and free shipping was cheaper than downloading it digitally. Hey, I'm not complaining. Anyway, as you can clearly see, it takes a lot of inspiration from Wipeout. Hell, it even says on the back of the box that it's a tribute without specifically naming the game. But as far as I can find, none of the former Wipeout staff worked on this one. There are a few different styles of race like time attacks, regular races, and even boss races. There will be lots of instances where you're the only one on the track. You can strafe with the right analog stick and also pitch your hovercraft forward and back. I don't think I've ever played a dual stick racing game before, at least not that I can remember, but you do get used to it quickly enough. I still much prefer using the shoulder buttons to strafe, but I'm using the triggers for acceleration and brake, so I guess that option's gone. You can also press A to boost, but since I only have two thumbs, I can't strafe while boosting or pitching. You earn money and you can buy vehicles as well as items that you can equip to help you out. There are no real weapons here like there are in Wipeout. The visuals are generally pretty good. The frame rate is silky smooth, and I like the pseudo-shaded polygon look of a lot of the surfaces. The music is generally pretty good as well, and full surround sound is supported. Overall, the game feels emptier and certainly lower budget than your typical Wipeout game. Still, it's worth a play since it's cheap. And since we're here, let's take a quick look at Redout II on the PlayStation 5. This one is also on every platform known to man, but how often do I get to show a PS5 game on the show? I'm sure that will increase in the future once the PS5 is a dusty, ancient retro relic. The deluxe edition here was also pretty cheap. It comes with a season pass. I don't understand season passes in video games. Is this permanent or does it go away after the season is over? It makes no sense. Don't call them season passes, just call them expansion packs or whatever. So, does this one improve anything over the first? Well, the visuals are a little bit better. The controls are pretty much the same, at least in regards to the second analog stick strafing and pitching. Again, it works well enough, but honestly, it doesn't really add anything to the gameplay. I honestly sometimes feel I need 3 or 4 hands here. I don't subscribe to the idea that the more complex the controls, the more exciting the game. This one now overheats if you boost too much. It fixes itself after a short time, and you can see the status of it all with the yellow gauge at the bottom of the screen. As you race, a green gauge will fill up. Fire it off to do a super boost. Visually, it looks more like F-Zero GX on the GameCube than Wipeout. But make no mistake, this game is no F-Zero. The music is okay, and it offers a mode that claims it's safe for streaming. I don't stream, and I really don't plan to, but that's good. Neither music mode offered up anything noteworthy. When it's all said and done, I feel that Wipeout is better, and of course F-Zero is better than that. And there you go, a bunch more spiritual follow-ups. In fact, there was another racing game that I was thinking about including, but I think I'll save that for next time. Speaking of next time, what are some other spiritual follow-ups that you recommend that I check out? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. Hey Jackie, how you doing? No, it's Jackie Crush, not Jack Crush. Can you say Jackie? Look, that's you, Jackie. Jack. Okay, now Jackie.